A good conversation can shift the direction of change forever. Would you leave it to chance? Join the authors of Design to Change and explore this series of conversations with designers and event owners. Driven by the need and conversations with event owners and event designers who use the event canvas around the world, this series explores the depths of conversations to elevate your abilities to look and act beyond the now. Episodes are hosted by Ruud Janssen, Roel Friesen, Dennis Lehrer, and Paul VanDeventer, with illustrious changemakers, designers, and pioneers in the field of design and beyond. To explore these conversations and additional content, visit designtochange.online. But now, let's start the conversation.
All right. Welcome back to the Design to Change podcast. My name is Ruud Janssen, your host. And today with me, I have a very special guest all the way from California, Paul VanDeventer, President and CEO of MPI, Meeting Professionals International. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you. So excited to be with you. Good to always see you and to be able to hang out a little bit.
Absolutely. So, Paul, you heard already in the intro, I mean, we've known each other for quite some time. I think you've been with MPI for, over 13 and a half years, I think by now. I looked up on your LinkedIn profile.
Yes. And you and I met right about the first week or two I was on the job. So
exactly, yeah. I just left the International Board of Directors. My colleague Roel was there. I think he was part of the hiring committee at the time. And we have a long history together with MPI. But before we fall into that, the question I wanted to ask you is the question in the Design to Change book. A good conversation can shift the direction of change forever. Would you leave it to chance?
What I wouldn't leave to chance is avoiding the conversation. And I think that's the most important thing, that if you don't step up, whether it's a difficult situation, whether it's a creative opportunity, whether it's innovation, and you remain isolated in your thoughts and perspective, and you don't have a conversation, then you will not get the advancement and achievements and progress that could potentially be there. So avoiding the conversation to me is a chance I never want to take, even when I'm uncomfortable walking into the conversation.
Yeah, and I think this is part of the leadership qualities. I think that as we explored those in the Design to Change book, and we're now in season 6, if I'm not wrong, with this podcast, because this book, when we launched it, written during COVID, which we almost seem to have collectively forgotten by now, addressed that very issue, right? What's it like to own an event? And what's it like for the event designer or the event team to have those conversations with the event owners? Because, you as the head of Meeting Professionals International, the largest association of meeting professionals on the planet, you are acutely aware, I suppose, of the fact that you're an event owner, but many event owners don't consider themselves or haven't thought of themselves as event owners. Do you feel like, I was just listening to the recap of the World Education Congress in San Antonio, where in the promo clip you said, we don't just share a profession, but we share a purpose. What does that feel like when you're the CEO of the association that looks after all of these people that are involved in the events industry, who sometimes feel a little bit less understood in the business world than they would like to? What does that feel like for you?
It's interesting, Ruud. You mentioned I'm in this 13 and a half years. Prior to taking on this role of leading MPI, I was an event owner in a number of different scenarios, whether that was an organizational leader, a sales leader, customer events. But I never thought about them in the way that I've come to think about them since joining MPI. And I've never understood or perhaps even considered the people behind the events that I was the owner of. So it's opened my eyes, and what happened to me in a very quick, shortened period of time after joining MPI was an understanding of, first of all, the actual impact of business events.
Yeah.
That this is a very specific industry with a clear purpose. And then the second part that came to life for me was the professionals that actually drive this industry. Their passion, their creativity, their commitment to using events as a leverage to drive our society forward. And so I look at it very differently now than I did then. And I deal with both sides of that coin now of how do we how do we support the people who put these events on to make them better at what they do and to make the events more powerful, while also telling that story of the power of events so that people who are sitting in the old seat I sat in recognize that this isn't just about having a sales conference. It's not just about bringing your team together for team building. It's not just about uh, getting different businesses aligned in a room to talk about joint opportunities. There's so much
Yeah.
more opportunity there if designed with intent and if you use
Yeah.
and give a seat at the table to the people doing that design. And I think that's really where work like you guys are doing.
Yeah.
So many of the educational institutions now in talking more about strategic side of events, the marketing impact of events and the innovation side of events. That is really changing our industry and giving us the leverage to have a bigger voice and a seat at the table in ways we didn't in the past. We were historically operators and folks who executed. Uh, we were not asked about the design. We weren't asked about the purpose or how our design could impact the purpose and deliver a higher level of ROI. So the world's changing. That's good news.
Mhm.
It also means the people in our community have a lot more responsibility than they might have had 15 years ago, or I think even more relevant post COVID. And it is like we talk about COVID like the good old days. Remember that as it was 200 years ago. It was 5 years ago, and
Yeah.
but our industry has changed so much since then.
Yeah. If you would think about the role before you knew about MPI, let's say in your event owner role where you weren't consciously aware of being an event owner, you were leading an organization, a sales organization, or any type of organization for that matter, and you think back at the blind spot maybe that you had, or our industry thinks it's a blind spot, but as a leader in those other industries, events are just part of the cycle of business that you do to get stuff done, right? So being more conscious of it, what what do you think people are missing that don't see it in that way?
Well, I think they're missing the opportunity to truly leverage what they've committed to that event, and they've
Yeah.
committed their time, they've committed their teams and their customers or whoever the audience is time.
Yeah.
They've committed money, uh, and they've committed their reputation in some ways because when you go into that, when you put something on stage, you've put it out there. So if they're just thinking of the event designer as the person that's going to make sure there's food on the table, or there's enough chairs in the room, or the bus will show up to get us to our next destination, they're missing an entire piece of the value chain.
Yeah.
The organizations that are bringing the event designer in the loop on overall strategy so they understand the big picture of where the organization's going, um, challenges they're facing, opportunities they have. They keep them around that table on a regular cycle, not just bringing them in when we're just talking about the event, but
Yeah.
overall business. They're going to have that person will be much more attuned to what we're trying to get done and can design outputs into the event that will drive that. They
Mm.
also will have great input into other parts of the business. Just by nature, if you look at the really skilled, accomplished event designers, innovators, operators, they're just great business people too. Strategically, tactically, they've got really sharp minds. So bring them into the fold and leverage that asset you have either on your team or as a third party partner helping you.
Yeah, I think it's a good piece of advice because obviously we're preaching for our own, for our own discipline, which is not more than normal. But many leaders, when they consider the culture of their organizations, which is the one thing they usually want to shape going forward, crafting, quantifying, and celebrating the progress over time is one of their key, things why they have these milestone moments called events.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure looking at the budget line items, sometimes they wonder, how does this event create value for my organization, right? And
Yeah.
why am I putting all this risk and reward into this one basket? And it is tedious, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just, you get me thinking about it. I worked for some really big brands, global companies, $1 billion to $100 billion organizations. And as I look back on each of them, the
Yeah.
event department reported to HR. We just think about that. So you're just looking at it as a staff role.
Yeah.
And in those days, HR was not considered a strategic organization the way it is today. Today, obviously, the people resourcing is so much more at the forefront of organizational design and value creation. But I mean, back then, it was in HR because it's just something you called upon, like the audit team or the finance team or office supplies. It's like, okay, let's call the event team and have them
Get a
figure out
functional
our
thing
menu.
done, right? Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, so much more you see that the role, the department reporting up through chief operating officer, through CFO, where you're looking at overall organizational impact, and probably more commonly into the marketing and strategy groups. And
Yeah.
so organizations are starting to figure it out.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, with your experience in those different types of company like Amex and Walgreens, and I'm sure people that listen to the podcast, if you're okay with that, would like to add also your LinkedIn profile, because when people connect to the worlds of people that are on our podcast, it's also important to understand where does the thinking come from, right? And what is that evolution? Because being in the events industry I've been a member since 1995, I think, of MPI, forever and a day.
Thank you.
Really dating myself there.
40-year member.
Well, not really, because what's interesting, Paul, I'll tell you the story is I became a member. I was just out of hotel management school, and I was really keen to discover this thing that they were setting up back in the Netherlands at the time. And about 2 years into the game, and I was helping set up some of the committees and some of the work, a new director of marketing and sales came into the company I was working for at the time. And she said to me, yeah, we only have budget for one MPI member. So that membership belongs to the director of marketing and sales. You as the banquet sales and banquet and conference manager. Yeah, that's not your role. You should focus on our clients, right? So it was taken away from me. And literally, it was one of the reasons why at the time, in my evolution at that company, it was one of those things where I said, hold on, there's something here where, we're sharing a common purpose and we're trying to get something done, not just within the company, but also in a bigger scale.
Yeah.
That my leader at the time discovered that if you want to be a good conference and banquet manager in a 5-star hotel, you need to understand what's happening outside of the hotel, not just what's happening inside the hotel.
Yeah.
And so he sent me off to a conference. It wasn't one of MPI's conferences, but it was a conference in the US. And I came back even more motivated to, to take back my membership, which, I couldn't afford at the time. I was just, a poor.
Okay, you weren't motivated enough to pay for yourself.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like
Yeah,
at the time, that amount of money on a salary was still like, although I'd sniffed what it could be, I couldn't like somehow but I also felt I couldn't because my leader said that it was for her level to be part of this thing, right?
right.
Well, when I got to my next job, right, the first thing I did, even I think when I applied it, is to say, well, as part of what I want to do, I do want to be a member of some industry association. And the one that I want to be a member of is MPI. So I've got a gap of 2 years, I think in my
Okay.
history. But it actually motivated, it's kind of like that teacher that tries to disprove that you can do something, and
Yeah,
it became the antithesis of, then having the drive to actually say, I think we're going to prove her wrong
yeah,
at some
I
stage.
love
And
that.
and it is a funny kind of motivational thing where, and I hope people that are entering the industry now, and I see this with my very own kids who have gone to the Future Leader Forum and have been to some of the
Yeah,
IMEX or MPI events. Although they're not in the event space, um, I want to encourage them to become a part of a professional association to develop their own leadership skills and discover things outside of your workplace, right? To develop yourself. And I think how I've come to appreciate MPI is that worlds open as a result of investing your own time in what you do as a member. Um, um, and over the years, getting so much back that you could never put into a pamphlet of here's why you should be a member of this organization, right?
and that if Ruud, you've hit on the biggest challenge we have in professional associations,
Mhm.
particularly ones like MPI, where you don't have an industry required certification. So there's some industries where you have to belong to the association, so you get that certificate to put on the wall to make you official.
Yeah,
In our case, it's all self-development.
yeah,
And um, when I came into this role, one of the first things I did was I spent 6 months basically on a listening tour, and I went and I met with a bunch of um, current but more tenured members as well as members who left, and I kept hearing the same theme over and over, which you were just articulating, that the things you got out of engaging with your association, and I won't just make an MPI, with your professional association, were
yeah,
invaluable to you in your career development. And what I
yeah,
also heard was in my personal development. There's so much that came out of this formation of network, friends, job opportunities, marriage, so many things that bloomed out of it. If it wasn't for MPI, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, was what I kept hearing over and over again. For
yeah,
14 years now, I've been trying to articulate that into a value story to a 20-something-year-old who is saying, why should I pay 400 euros a month or 400 euros a year to belong? I don't get the value story. It's like the value story will be 30 years from now when you look back. And
yeah, yeah,
if it wasn't, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have gotten this job. I wouldn't have had this career path. I wouldn't have picked up these skills. It's really, really hard to articulate when someone's thinking short-term value to what they get out of a professional association. But I've become as passionate as you about preaching the value of professional associations. And that's when I talk to students or outside the industry, one thing I'm always putting out there is find and belong to some association.
yeah,
And I regret in my prior career, while I belonged to some associations, I did it strictly for the sales generation opportunity, right? Like if I show
yeah,
up at their annual conference, I'll get some sales leads and I'll close some business. I never engaged personally and volunteered and got involved. And
yeah,
that's where I see so much growth out of our members in our community when they, to your point, you get out of it what you put into it.
yeah,
If you get that gym membership in January and you don't show up, it still hasn't done you any good. If you join MPI or your company pays for it, you pay for it, but you don't go to the meetings, you don't join committees, you don't take advantage of the educational opportunities, there's no return, and there will never be a return.
Yeah, yeah. It's a hard conceptual thing to wrap your head around as a 20 something, I suppose, right? Or whatever the age is when people consider doing this.
I mean, you
Um,
talk about my American Express days, the early days of
yeah,
Amex when I was there. I was early 80s I joined, and that's still the infant stage of the creation of the credit cards. And they somehow captured this whole persona that if you want to show you've proven yourself in life and you want prestige, carry an American Express card. And they built entire marketing and ad campaigns around that. The young adults taking their parents out to lunch for the first time and using their American Express card, or someone pulling it out among their friends and all their friends saying, "Wow, you've made it." They were able to capture that aspirational um, opportunity and prestige, and still have built off it. They are that is their brand, and that brand is what they sell and have been successful with. We still, any association, we haven't figured out how to capture that perception of, if it wasn't for my association, I wouldn't be there today. How do you tell that to someone new to industry and new to the
yeah,
workforce, that um, gra figure it out, which one it is, dig in, get involved, and that will pay off for you um, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. It's just a tough sell. We
yeah.
got to figure out how to tell the story.
It's funny how you mention how Amex in the beginning of such a cycle of something that now seems, like an unmissable commodity almost, a credit card, right?
Yeah,
Which, I mean, how could you travel around the planet without one?
right.
It's taken years to ferment in the mind of the users whether this is something they do or don't need. Yeah. Coming back to the, I
And
mean,
now we
within,
go touchless, right? Now we go without credit
yeah,
cards.
I mean the whole principle of now not having to carry the card is your badge of honor, right? Where I can travel without my wallet and just indeed, I was just in Canada for a couple of weeks and we were doing a program at Purdue, and it's just the level of ease that you have of just being able to touch and go, where the technology has changed how we behave, right? So, um, but also I feel with MPI, what I'm keen to explore a little bit further with you is how do events for an organization like MPI, which is all about events, how do you um, how does the cadence of what you do and how does the people evolve in their careers, but you still have new entrants coming into the profession that might need a certain level of something, right? And then you have people at another level that might look for something different. And many of these people that, maybe, back in the day thought the credit card was the coolest thing on the planet, um, and still treated as such, right? Versus those that, have never seen a credit card up close and only know their digital, payment transfers.
Yeah.
Um, how do you appeal? How do you appeal to them? And how do you keep your global flagship event, the World Education Congress? You've got the European Meetings and Events Congress. You've got the event in Canada that's going to happen in Vancouver, I believe now for what
Yes.
is it, the
Yep.
sixth or
Couple
seventh time?
weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks. You just had the event in Austin. How do you deal with event ownership when the audience you're catering to are the people that put on the events? That must be like the hardest event owner job in the world.
So it's a great challenge, and we internally, I don't know who coined the phrase, but I've picked up on it. We're cooking for chefs.
Yeah.
Uh, and cooking for chefs can be really, really rewarding, but also humbling, because your audience is the greatest critics.
Yeah.
What you've come to, my team's come to realize, and I think those who have successfully uh, flourished in our organization, um, is that you also they're critical of you because they love you and they love what they do.
Yeah.
And if you embrace that critique, you embrace that input, and you embrace them in dialogue, they'll actually give you really positive feedback and positive growth, and you will learn together. So it's kind of like they're criticizing or they're pointing things out because they really love it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like a parent with a child. So there, it is. I know there's a lot of extra stress on our team when they are putting on one of our events, especially one of our bigger ones. And we do host a handful of what we call signature events every year. And then we're, across our chapters, we're putting on almost 500 different events on a regular basis. So
Yeah.
there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
We are still, at the end of the day, our role is not an event company. We're a professional association, which means we're an education company. And
Yeah.
our key job is to help those in this particular industry do their jobs better. Uh,
Yeah.
and one of the things when you and I first met and I came into MPI, um, I think we as an organization had lost our way a little bit and started to think of ourselves as an event company. And
Mm.
we had to refocus our purpose. We weren't an event company, nor should we be competing with event companies. We happen to put on some events, but our biggest role is as an educator. And
Yeah.
so if you then take that internally and say, yeah, but you're cooking for chefs, well, as an educator, what better way to learn? And so
Yeah.
what our staff's been really good at is embracing those members to help us do it better. Um, and even then spontaneously learning from our mistakes. And we had a great example this past year when we did our World Education Congress in San Antonio, our largest of our host hotels. We had almost 500 guests staying at one particular property. Their
Mm.
water main broke
Oh.
uh, about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and the building above the second floor had no water for almost 24 hours.
Ouch. Yeah.
Um, so, tough situation. You've got 500 impacted attendees, including a lot of our staff were staying there. Me is one. Um, so, what do you do and how do you handle that? So, what happened is we went through that crisis management, um, figured out what to do. And then at the end of the second day, so it happens in like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on day one. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon on day two, it's up and running. And we had then announced that tomorrow morning at X time, we're going to have a panel of the general manager of the hotel, um, someone from the convention and visitor bureaus, our marketer who had to get the communication plans out, and our lead event designer for MPI are all going to be on a panel and talk about the shit they had to deal with over the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
And
And
the
what you
room was
learn from it in
packed.
real time. Yeah.
Right. The room was packed because,
Yeah.
we learned from each other. And what ended up happening then is we got our event surveys back, and people, instead of beating us down and criticizing us for one of our hotels having a challenge, gave us really positive feedback of how we handled the challenge. And I think that's when you're cooking for chefs, or if you're just putting on an event anyway, um, embrace the challenge, engage with your audience. To back to your first question, have the conversation. Uh, we
Yeah.
could have we could have worked with the hotel and figured out the plumbing issue. Um, but we went beyond that. We then, pushed the hotel and we pushed the destination to communicate with our attendees and offer alternatives. And then we went out and said, and how do we do this and how we learn from it? What mistakes do we make? What can we do
Yeah.
different next time? And we messaged all that out. So you turned a challenge into a really great way to engage your community and show value to them.
Yeah. And I think that's facing some of these risks and rewards head on um, is probably the best demonstration of that, right? When you're called the World Education Conference, and you experience something that is unpleasant, although, solvable, right? It's between brackets, a first world problem to be out of water for 22 hours and then be able to use water again, right? I mean, but you need to deal with it. And kudos to you and the team for taking it on like that. I know that those things are not easy, but they do happen, and you have to think on your feet. And that's one of the things I think many of the MPI members have in common, is that they are people with a lot of common sense, and they can be strategic thinkers. They can also design in the moment. They can think forward what happens to a group if they do something in a specific way. So they have predictive powers, which are also probably the gold dust of any event team, right? That knows what they're doing.
While you're hosting events for event designers, I think if you embrace that audience, it's only going to help you get better. And another example is, while their surveys come out great, that survey is being responded to by the people who attended the event. Our team approached me this year and said, we actually want to go beyond our loyal audience and do a survey of people who don't come to our event and ask them why. What's our perception? Why aren't they attending? And we're just getting that results back from that work, which we did in partnership with Freeman. And it's scary. It's like doing a 360 review on yourself. There's a moment when you first read that input that you might crawl into a fetal position for a little bit. And then you come to terms with it. It's like, wow, that's the optics of a different angle. And if we could take some of that feedback and change our design, think of how much more valuable this conference will be for the current attendees. And then maybe we'll actually open it up to a bigger audience too and get new people coming. So again, keep going back to have the conversation. Be willing to talk to those who you may not have a conversation with today, and ask them why not, and learn from that.
Yeah, because that stakeholder validation, the bigger you become, the harder it becomes, right? So, for a small regional event or for a chapter event, that might be fairly direct, right? Because what your members in your area feel or say and do. When it comes to a region, that's already much more difficult, let alone if you want to, blanket the whole world with an education congress. Events have different functions and different sizes. And I've been to quite a few of these, and must say they're always very interesting. It's great, especially to notice your own evolution offset against the event's evolution, right? Which is also part of the learning curve, I suppose, right? That you have. On the other hand, I could end up going to an industry event every week, and travel across the planet and not be able to get 1 inch of my own pillow's equity over a long period of time.
So how do we capture your time to prove that value as you're making a choice between them? That's important. And I think the other thing, it's really important to know your lane, because of the fact there are so many options out there. And for me, we say WEC or WEC, and I sometimes think we are shortchanging ourselves by using that and not say World Education Congress, because it's an education congress. And there's still debate within our community about why we don't have a trade show. It's like, because trade shows are a different aspect of how to do business, and education congresses have a focus of their own. And frankly, when we used to mix the two together, we did not do the trade show well, and we probably undermined the value of the education portion. There's people out there, in our world, in our industry, talk about our great partner IMEX, that really know how to do a trade show, make a great value. But it's tough for them to do great education integrated there, because the people are busy doing business on the trade show floor. It's tough for us to do a trade show because people are busy learning, and they want to focus on education. So sometimes getting more narrow and understanding your lane can make the conference itself even more valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, and MPI strategically has made that choice at some point, right? To
They did.
dissect those two from each
I
other.
think you were on the board when it happened because it was just
True.
before
Yeah.
I joined.
Yeah.
And I think it was a brilliant move and
Yeah.
allowed us to really get better focused and better honed at what we should be doing, which is the education, the networking, the business development side.
Yeah. And truth be told, when I asked my GM at the time, I think it was, to join the first WEC, I think when David Kleiman was president, maybe back in 2002 or 2003, forget when it was. The reason that when it was called the World Education Congress, it sparked a good conversation between me and my decision maker, who said, hold on, but you're not in the educational space, are you? Although, then the motivation of having the conversation saying, well, for those people that are, putting on events across the globe, they get educated at one point in time together during this and experience what events are like. So sometimes something that for somebody else's perspective might seem out of lane is actually fully in the lane, right? So,
Yeah.
but you need to have the opportunity to discuss it and to to have that conversation. So,
Yep. Yep.
um, I know, Paul, we could talk about this for hours, and I want to take you backstage in a moment. But before we do that, there's one question I want to ask, which is, and it's part of what we talk about in the Design to Change book, right? Which is about driving change by mastering event design conversations. One of the things that is always important as a leader is to, look at the horizon of change, and when I look out, my window here in Switzerland, and I see this mountain on the other side, I can't look really beyond that horizon because I'm looking at the mountain, right? The mountain creates the horizon. May I ask, what's currently on your horizon of change? Something that you'd like to share with our listeners in the event design space?
Well, for me, coming out again of the pandemic, I look at my first 8 years in this role. We were trying to prove the value of in-person events.
Yeah,
If you want a positive of the pandemic, it proved it for us. For those who are of certain generations like mine, and they remember "It's a Wonderful Life," we had a George Bailey moment. The world learned what it was like to live without events, and they didn't like it.
no,
So we're no longer around proving the need for events. It's now being able to demonstrate ongoing ROI and investment in events. And people are getting much more creative then about how events are conducted and um, how you bring audiences together, engage the audience, and deliver value back to the key stakeholders. So
mhm,
for me right now, the exciting things are event design itself is accelerated. It is the people who are getting into it, the people our positions have been elevated. We're at a different table within organizations. We're being leaned into as event designers. I'm saying we in this, kind of regal way.
yeah,
I don't put myself. I'm just speaking of my members, my community.
mhm,
They're being leaned on and uh, embraced in a way that pre-pandemic they were hoping for, and now, in some ways, it's maybe a bit intimidating, but also very exhilarating. So you take
yeah,
that, and then you bring on top of that this technological revolution that's going on and the speed that it's happening. Um, it's just a wild time right now to be an industry overall.
yeah,
And to me, an incredibly exhilarating time to be in the event design world, and uh, how we can leverage those two things coming together: the perception of the value of events now and how important it is, and then the technologies that are going to make the role of the event designer more capable and free them up from a lot of the tactical to spend more time on the strategic and the innovative. And
Yeah,
it just makes the opportunity and the role so much more exciting.
it does. And I think the influence that they can have is significant. I know being an event owner can be a very lonely profession, right? It's lonely at the event owner seat, being on the event. I think one of the roles we have is in this industry is to make that role more pleasant and easier, or not easier, but
Yeah.
more gratifying, right? To make it less daunting to be an event owner. Like I think that's where we need to start.
Old corporate little catchphrase I used to hear all the time was one throat to choke. Who's the one throat to choke? And yeah, it's at the end of the day at a Congress, it's the event designer.
Yeah.
But I think in the prior days when they weren't controlling the strategy, they weren't controlling necessarily the purpose, they were more of the operational side. That was a really lonely seat because they didn't have a holistic opportunity to impact the event. It's still a lonely seat, but it's probably a more desirable seat because they are actually given the whole process to work with and really look at the event in its entirety, from the initial development strategy. How does that relate to the execution, matching to the purpose, and then the execution? So, still a lonely place, but I think a much more exciting, exhilarating place.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Paul, for that. I'd like to invite you to join us backstage after we play this little jingle. We'll talk more with Paul about some of the stuff we didn't get a chance to speak about now. But thank you for being on stage with us, Paul, and see you in a moment backstage.
Always great to catch up. I wish we had a pint in front of us, but good to see you.
This has been another episode of the Design to Change Designer Conversation series. Explore these conversations and additional content at designtochange.online. Want more right now? Tune into the backstage episode of this conversation and hear what the experts discuss off stage.